19th. I talked to Kent Marinas this week, and he will talk to us more as we get closer to time about numbers that we may need. But we'll feed them. They're going to be here that morning. So we'll feed them after church that day on July 18th. Also, one member, Mary Ruth, is going to get her back checked Tuesday. Get to see what may be able to give her a little relief. We'll keep her in our prayers. A prayer of thanksgiving that Marla got a little relief from her neck pain. And we're glad that we're all here. The blessing box that we have out there has not, it kind of goes in spurts. Sometimes it'll be used, it'll get cleaned out, and we have to keep it full. It hasn't been used a lot lately, except someone, and we feel it, we have a pantry back here, the church puts things into it, but other people do too, and we don't know who that is, and that's good. They just come, they put stuff in. They put a microwave in a little bit ago. And it was somebody came and left the microwave, and someone took it, so I'm glad it got used. Now we don't have the space for a lot of appliances, but I'm glad that was used. I'm glad that happened that way. Seemed like there was something else. Oh, this light. Steve, when we came in this morning, it was not blinking, and I was telling Kay, it looks like we finally got that fixed. Well, I guess not. But it's what it is. But it's been good. Paul tells us to clothe ourselves with gentleness. And that's kind of a strange concept for our world today. Just clothe ourselves with gentleness. The last few days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we've had the NFL draft. And that's where the 32 NFL teams will pick players from college that they want to be on their teams, and they take turns. And you wouldn't think that would take very long. They do seven players apiece. But Kim, it goes from Thursday night to Saturday night. 3 days of talking about the draft. A lot of resources go into this. They'll send out scouts during the college season to watch them. And they'll have guys test them. And they'll have, how tall are they? How much do they weigh? How fast are they? How much can they lift? All these things to test. And one of the reasons they do this is to make their picks better. But I think a lot of it is because they want to talk about it. And they talk about it incessantly, don't they, Kim? Now, Kim watched her fair share of this, but maybe not all 20 hours, but some. A little bit of it. I think Betty Jo has learned to watch a little bit of the NFL draft. That's part of it. But as they talk, these talking heads, they have to have something to say. And a lot of times they'll talk about their speed or whatever, but then they'll say, yeah, but he's very aggressive. He's got a violent attitude, very confident, has a mean streak. And those are all things that they're looking for. The teams are looking for that aggressiveness, that ambition, that violence that makes them a better player. At least they think it does. I've never once heard one of those commentators say, well, that guy clothes himself in gentleness, and we're going to pick him up for that. That's not something that our society really puts a lot of value in. Whether it's on the football field or whether it's in corporate America. If you go to a job interview, a lot of times, what they're looking for. This guy's very ambitious, very confident. We think he'll be a good part of our company. Again, very seldom do you see that person is a very gentle person. I think he'll make a good employee. I see it in the courtroom that people will say, man, I'm looking for a good lawyer, and I want somebody that'll fight. And sometimes you need a lawyer that will fight. I'm not going to argue with that. Sometimes you do. But Kay will know who I'm talking about here, but we both know an attorney, good attorney. But sometimes he fights just to fight. Rather than trying to get the best result for his client, he wants to fight because that's his personality. And if you're looking for somebody to fight, he'll do it. But sometimes that's not what you need. Sometimes that's not what we want. Sometimes we need to take it into consideration to clothe ourselves in gentleness. This is from Colossians 3:12. Depending upon your translation, some of them may not say gentleness, but this one does. Since God chose you to be holy people He loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Clothe yourselves with gentleness. And this is one of the fruits of the Spirit that we've been looking at. Gentleness is one of them that we want to consider. And when we consider this, we want to remember that this is one of the terms that Jesus uses to describe himself, is gentle. And when we look at Jesus' time, when we look at the philosophers that wrote during this time, a lot of them wrote about virtue. Aristotle spent a lot of time writing about virtue, about good qualities. And then they're good. Hey, I'm not arguing with that. And he would include gentle as one of his good virtues. But to Aristotle, gentle meant that you didn't take an extreme position either way. You weren't very violent, but you weren't very meek either. You were kind of down the middle. That's what he considered to be gentle. But to be humble and gentle and treat people with respect was not a characteristic that was highly valued. Just like today, where we like the rough and the tough and the hero type, so did they. They were looking for someone who would tell you how good he was and then back it up. And we're like that. We still like that. We still like the heroes. I do. I like hero movies. I like for the good guy to win in the end. Now, I know some of you are old enough to remember the old Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns from the 60s. I like those movies. Still watch them sometimes. You know, but Clint Eastwood rides into town and takes no prisoners and doesn't say much, but he's not very gentle either. I don't think that would qualify. But when we look at Jesus, just as he was a revolutionary when it came to politics, just where he overturned everyone's expectations of what they were looking for in a king, he overturned their expectations of what they were looking for in characteristics, of what it meant to have a good attitude. He overturned that. Now our text today is going to be Matthew chapter 11, and we're going to begin in verse 25 to the end of the chapter. And it tells us, at that time, Jesus declared, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. You have hidden these things from the wise and understanding and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. And no one knows the Son except the Father. And no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When we read that passage, it's good to kind of take it in context. Chapter 11, the disciples of John have come to Jesus, and they're kind of like everybody else, saying, this is not the king that we were expecting. We were expecting someone to lead us militarily to victory over the Romans. And where we have you, that you're not doing that. Are you the one, or do we need to look for another? That's what they ask him. And Jesus responds to them, you tell John what you've seen. That the sick are made well, that the lame walk, that the hungry are fed, and the blind regain their sight. You go and tell him that. And then Jesus goes into these woes, because he's talking about to these cities. This is what's been happening in your communities, and yet you are not responding. And we don't know who all is there. We know that Jesus' disciples are there. We know that John's disciples are there, and then there is the crowd. And we don't know who is all in the crowd, but we're pretty confident that there are people that are just curious, some of them who are actually wanting to listen. And then, of course, we have the scribes and the Pharisees and the lawyers who are looking to trap Jesus and are wanting to find some way to criticize him. And when we see this, Jesus is talking, and then he suddenly just breaks into a prayer. And it makes me think of today. We know there's lots of problems in the world today. But have you ever been somewhere and somebody breaks into a prayer? The thing is people give that respect. They will stop what they're doing and listen. Whether you're an atheist, or whether you're a Muslim, or a Christian, or a Jew, or whatever you may be, when somebody goes into prayer, you get quiet and you give respect. And I appreciate that. I can remember, I think I probably told this story, but as my dad got older, and most of y'all have heard my dad pray.
Oh,
Some of you, but for a while.
yeah.
And he sometimes had long prayers. But they were good prayers. But we would be at a restaurant, and I'd take him to the doctor, we'd go to the restaurant, and my dad's going to pray before his meal. And he wouldn't just be praying for the meal, but he'd be praying for everybody in the restaurant. And he would start praying, and the whole restaurant would get quiet because he could speak loud. But everybody would show the prayer respect. And I think we all do that. Whether we're agreeing with the prayer or not, we will show respect. And so Jesus is talking, he's teaching, and then he goes into this prayer. And I really like the way he says it. I don't know that we know his tone of voice, but I think that he shows that he's a master communicator, that he doesn't have to be mean, that he can use a little humor and a little more. Now this is not the English Standard Version, this is the Message, which is a paraphrase, but I like it. I like the way it's phrased. He says, abruptly, Jesus broke into prayer. Thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. You've concealed your ways from the sophisticates and know-it-alls, but spell them out clearly to ordinary people. Yes, Father, that's the way you like to work. And so sometimes when we just read, we don't get the tone of voice. We don't get all the subtleties of the language. But I think when we look at this, and you know who's listening, that you have the scribes and the Pharisees and the disciples, and he's tossing the sophisticates and the know-it-alls. And that brings it home a little bit. That sometimes we need to be a little more simple in what we have to say. But he also talks about himself being gentle, and how we all need to clothe ourselves in gentleness. Now when we look at gentleness, he says it here. Come to me, all who labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When we look at gentleness, sometimes I think we need a definition, and this is the one from Merriam-Webster. Free from harshness, sternness, or violence. And that is a definition. But I think when Jesus says that he is gentle, it's more than that. It is more than just being free from harshness or free from violence. In some ways, it's the way you handle aggression. It's the way you handle violence. And if we're going to be gentle, it's when someone is attacking us, whether that's verbally or being aggressive towards us, that's a time that we can use gentleness. I'm going to tell a story that Tony told the other night. I think it was Wednesday night when we were studying 1 John. He talked about when he was a lieutenant at the unit down here in Childress, that one of the prisoners was throwing a fit, in a great way, and was being very aggressive and ornery. And they called the lieutenant, which was Tony, and he came, and instead of, we all know that in the prison has a way of dealing with people who are causing trouble. That can be dealt with. However, Tony chose to talk to the guy. That he chose to show him a little respect, to treat him gently as opposed to harshly, and was able to diffuse the system and talk to the man and bring him in and listen to him, and how important that can be. And when we look at this, when we look at the idea of being gentle, I think how we respond to aggression is one of the keys. And we know that there's not always can we resolve something gently, particularly in the world we have today. But there's always an idea that that's a good idea. And I think not so much when we're affected with, if we have an active shooter come in. We've all been trained, maybe we haven't, but a lot of us have been trained in how to respond to an active shooter event. The DPS Sergeant, Chris Ward, has come and given lots of lessons on that and classes on that. And I know Dan Hawthorne, the old DPS guy in Memphis, the elder of the church, has given that active shooter training. And you're taught to either hide or flee or fight. That's kind of your fight or flight reactions. And sometimes that's all you can do. But there are times that you have to choose to talk, to choose to be gentle. I look at our onlines, and I don't go online much for Facebook or conversations, but I know it happens. I know that about a week ago, there was a lot of controversy in the children's church. And there was a lot of harsh things said online by many people. And how you handle that makes such a difference. Do you handle that by going back at them and being more aggressive? Or do you return that aggressive speech or attack online with a gentle word? And I think that means a lot about how we handle ourselves as Christians. I think online is hard because you kind of can hide behind the anonymity. Is you don't have to look at the person in the face. They've said something you don't like and you can respond to it, whether it's about what's going on at the church or whether it's something about politics or whether it's something about the basketball team. We were talking about Quail basketball this morning, Headland Quail basketball. Sometimes there needed to be a little gentleness there. Sometimes there wasn't. But sometimes a little gentleness can go a long way to diffusing the situation. And when we look at this, we see there, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And we see that Jesus described himself as gentle. And sometimes we get the idea that the gentleness of Jesus is not the same as the gentleness of God. That sometimes we have the idea that God was a much more stern, more wrathful God. And that Jesus is where the gentleness comes in. But sometimes that's not right. This is one of my favorite stories. Is that Elijah has run. He's got people chasing him. And he is running from Jezebel who's trying to kill him. And he runs and he runs and he comes and he rests. And you know what he gets? He gets a loaf of bread from heaven delivered by an angel. That's not such a bad deal. And he eats it and he runs some more. And then he gets to this cave. And he is ready to die. He is disgusted with the whole situation. I'm the only one left and here I am hiding in a cave and people are wanting to kill me. And then God talks to him. Then he was told, go stand on the mountain at attention before God. God will pass by. A hurricane wind ripped through the mountains and shattered the rocks before God. But God wasn't to be found in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But God wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, fire. But God wasn't in the fire. And after the fire, a gentle and quiet whisper. Is that God approached Elijah with a gentle and quiet whisper. I like that because so many times we want, and I think I'm one of the worst. I look for that great event, the fire, the hurricane. There's where God is. And sometimes it is in listening and being quiet and letting God speak to us that we see where he is and that we can learn by being still and listening. And this is from Isaiah. We looked at Isaiah this morning in Sunday school, but here's another one of Isaiah's prophecies talking about God. And I think this might very well be about the Messiah. He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom and gently lead those that are with young. Gently lead them. Being a shepherd. Being carried. There's plenty of room that we can see that God was gentle, that Jesus was gentle, and that we need to clothe ourselves with gentleness. You know, when Jesus gave that description, he said that, come unto me and you will find rest. Here's another one from Jeremiah, very similar. Thus says the Lord, stand by the roads and look, and ask for the ancient paths, where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for your souls. When Jesus promises us rest, it's not just the cessation of work. It's not just that we don't have something to do. It's that we have that rest in God. That we have that chance to accept his gentleness. That we can be still, that we can find rest, and we can go forward. And when he promises us gentleness, and he promises us rest, That is a great reward that we have. That opportunity not just to quit work, but to rest in the gentleness of the Lord. To clothe ourselves with gentleness. One of the things about gentleness is we want to spread it to the world. We do. We want it to go. Where we go, we want gentleness to go with us. We also want it here. We want a gentleness here in the congregation and in our lives. And one of that things means is being willing to listen. Being willing to listen to one another. To be able to help one another, whatever that may be. Whether that means that we try to help with a problem, or it means that we encourage you to accept Christ, to put Him on in baptism, or whatever else it may be. That we treat one another with gentleness, but with help. And that's what we have today. We're about to have our invitation song, and then we're going to take communion. And as we do, let's remember Jesus. Let's remember what He did, and let's remember His gentleness towards us. And as we seek to be like God, let's seek to be transformed into Christ's image, let's remember to clothe ourselves with gentleness. If you would come as we stand and as we sing.